Okay, good evening everybody. It's 7 o'clock on the 2nd of August and this is a meeting of the Epping Forest District Council Area Planning Subgroup East. My name is Councillor Ian Hadley, I'm the chairman this evening. Before we start the meeting proper, I have a message for those people in the well of the chamber. I would like to remind everyone present that this is a hybrid meeting. Will be broadcast live to the internet or filmed and will be capable of repeated viewing or other such use by third parties. Therefore, by participating in this meeting, you are consenting to be filmed and to the possible use of those images and sound recordings for webcasting and or training purposes. If any public speakers on MS Teams do not wish to have their image captured, they should ensure that their video setting throughout the meeting is turned off and set to audio only. Please also be aware that if a technical difficulties interrupt the meeting and cannot be overcome, I may need to adjourn the meeting. Members are reminded to activate the microphones before speaking. Okay, once again, welcome everybody. Welcome members, visitors, officers and those on video conferencing. My name is Councillor Ian Hadley. I'm the chairman this evening. On my left, I have Nigel Richardson from Planning. On my right, Vice Chairman Heather Brady, Councillor Heather Brady. And my far right, Gary Woodall, who's Democratic Services, and Rebecca at the end working all the audio-visual items here and pulling the levers and pressing the buttons. Okay, into the meeting. Apologies for, sorry, let me just, before that. Advice to public speakers attending the Council Planning Subcommittees. Done?
Chairman, I have advised the speakers and there is some advice on the agenda for noting.
Thank you. Apologies for absence.
Chairman, we have apologies tonight from Councillor Janet Whitehouse.
Thank you.
And can I add Councillor John Whitehouse?
Both. No more? Good. Declarations of interest. Councillor McCready.
Thank you, Chairman. Non-pecuniary, as a member of Epping Town Council's Planning and General Purposes Committee, item 13 and 14, which is 0597 and 0832. I will be staying in through the debate and I will be voting. Thank you.
Any others? Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. Likewise, I'm a member of Thaden Boyce Parish Council Planning Committee. I have been consulted in respect to the item at 28 Brayside, Piercing Hill. However, I will make my decisions tonight based upon the papers that are before us and the arguments I hear this evening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Payne.
I am chair of Shearing Parish Council, and so item 9 is relevant to me.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. Just for clarity here, I am the portfolio holder for asset management. The top floor of the civic offices is part of the asset portfolio of the council, and therefore I have an interest in item number 14. It's non-pecuniary, it's non-prejudicial. I haven't been part of the discussions on this application, so I shall remain in the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Okay. Minutes of the last meeting on pages 7 to 8. Any comments? None, so you're happy for me to sign those as being a correct record? Thank you. Any other business?
Thankfully, no, Chairman.
Site visits. Good grief, silence. Thank you. Okay, into the main meeting. We're changing the order here, and the first item on is actually number 12, which is Brayside, 28 Piercing Hill, Thaden Boys, CM16 7JW, pages 51 to 72. Who's leading us through that?
That's me, Chair.
Thank you, James.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so yes, so item 12 is 28 Piercing Hill in Thaden Voice, known as Brayside. The application before members tonight is for the demolition of an existing dwelling and the erection of a replacement. The proposal is before committee tonight due to an objection from the parish council and a neighbour, and officers are recommending that planning permission is granted. So, starting with the site location plan, the application site is located on the western side of the Piercing Hill within the parish of Thaden Voice. The site is currently, this is the application site here, it's currently occupied by a large dwelling situated in a generous plot, and it is within the boundaries of Metropolitan Greenbelt. So this is the existing street scene that shows the current dwelling, the front boundary treatments and existing prominent trees. There's an oblique view of the neighbour to the north as well, and this is the detached garage, which is part of the property. And this is the existing street scene elevation, just given the current context of the site in relation to its neighbours in terms of its roof heights and profiles, to give members an idea. Now, as I said, the proposal is to demolish the existing house and to erect this Georgian-style dwelling in its place. In terms of Greenbelt, it's been considered that it's not materially larger than the one it's replacing. It's a 25% increase in volume, and so that's been considered to not be materially larger, so it's not inappropriate development in the Greenbelt. The new house will be positioned in the same position, or roughly in the same position as the existing. Its rear projection is comparable with that of the existing building, and there is a fair distance between the side elevation and the neighbour to the north, and therefore it's not considered there would be excessive harm to their living conditions. So this is quite an interesting drawing. This shows the street scene elevation, and it just puts it into some context because it does show the outline of the existing house here in red, and obviously the proposed dwelling behind it. I think in terms of its bulk, mass and scale, the proposed dwelling, it doesn't exceed the ridge of the existing, but it does have a somewhat more prominent roof profile than the existing. You can see that this area of flat roof, for example. However, the plot is wide, it is generous. The proposal is not overly dominant in the street scene or otherwise harmful to its overall character and appearance. Now, members would have noted in tonight's agenda that the Conservation Officer has objected to this scheme due to the loss of the existing building. It's considered to be a non-designated heritage asset of local significance by the Conservation Officer. Frankly, because it's part of a group of existing dwellings in the street scene, so a Victorian style of dwelling, some of which are locally listed, including the building to the north. But to be clear to members, the building that's part of this application is not statutorily listed or locally listed. And whilst there is a need to protect non-designated heritage assets, we've got clear policy support for that in our local plan. On balance, in this case, officers considered that the demolition and replacement is acceptable in this instance. So overall, it is recommended that planning permission is granted, subject to the conditions set out in tonight's agenda. Thank you.
Thank you, James. We have three speakers on this one. Firstly, Councillor Alice Padder, who's an objector in person. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Margaret Scott, who's lived with our family at 29 Piercing Hill for nearly 60 years. I'd like to make 4 concise points. First of all, principle of demolition. We don't believe that this house should be demolished. It forms part of a group of original Victorian villas where the sum total is greater than the component parts. 28 Piercing Hill is a fine old building and can never be replaced once it's been demolished. We do not believe in this situation that demolition is a sustainable solution. There are no mitigating factors here to help with the housing crisis. As we know, sustainable development lies at the heart of the NPPF and the Epping Forest local plan. The existing house is capable of a sustainable restoration rather than a total demolition. We believe that the arguments for retention of this important building have been well made by the Parish Council, TBAG, the Heritage and Conservation Officer, and the Victorian Society. Our second point is on planning policy. This is a green belt site. We submit that the design, mass and overall impact of this proposal would harm the openness of the green belt and also harm the unique rural character of the location. As such, the proposal does not comply with council policy on the protection of the green belt. For example, the applicant's street scene drawing compares the ridge height with the parapet height in a manner which is misleading. If we compare like for like, we can see that the replacement is a significantly bigger building which harms the openness of the green belt. Our third point is on design. The existing grouping of Victorian villas will be harmed by the loss of this original villa and its replacement with a neo-Georgian pastiche. We believe it will create an architectural misfit which will be destructive to the group as a whole. We're concerned by the potential for inappropriate details and materials. For example, there will be modern precast stone and machine-made bricks. The proposal means the loss of the original bricks, which we understand were made from clay from the local forest, and carved stone from the original building, which has had the benefit of evolution. It will have an urbanising effect on what is now a cohesive group of older structures. Our fourth point is on the impact on us as neighbours. We continue to make the point that there is still a terrace which clearly overlooks our garden, which will harmfully impact on our private amenity space. And we're concerned that the glass roof lights and balcony will harm the dark sky of the neighbourhood surrounding Epping Forest. In conclusion, each of the points I've made tonight is important in its own right, but the cumulative effect means that this proposal is wholly unacceptable, and we respectfully ask you to refuse the application. Thank you.
Okay, the next speaker is Jane Souness, Theydon Boys Parish Council.
In fact, tonight it's going to be Councillor Elizabeth Byrne. I was able to come, but thank you for Jane for sitting in for me. I didn't know I could come, but thank you for that. I'd like to start now. Good evening, councillors. The property at 28 Piercing Hill forms part of a row of distinctive period dwellings known as the Manor Villas. The original house makes an especially positive contribution to the locality, both individually and, importantly, as part of this historic group. The proposed replacement dwelling, however, is not felt to relate positively to the authentic historic context of the street scene and would be of a combined bulk and mass that would not complement the more modest proportions of the original 18 villas. Additionally, although the officer's report focuses on the increase in volume, the correct assessment in terms of greenbelt policy is that of openness. It is a criteria that has both a physical aspect and a visual aspect. The placement dwelling would be materially larger than the building it would replace, with an increase in floor place of some 40%, much of which would be attributed to the increase in the height of the roofscape at over 2 metres higher than the distinctive lower level double-hipped roof of the original. That increased height and span of the roof to create a third floor would be visually apparent, and therefore, both with respect to the physical and the visual aspect, the proposal would be contrary to policy DM4 and the NPPF. As identified in 2012, within the Heritage Asset Review and held within the evidence base of the new local plan, the assessment of the significance of these period buildings specifically calls out the strong aesthetic value and historic character of these original properties. Whilst the local list was not updated, as the Conservation Officer points out, this does not diminish the significance of 28 Piercing Hill in relation to the authenticity of the group of original villas, nor alter the special consideration that should be afforded to it. The judgment required in paragraph 203 of the NPPF requires regard to the scale of any harm or loss, and there can be no greater harm than demolish it. Finally, in terms of sustainable development, we have not previously seen the demolition of any of these original villas, but importantly, the consistent pattern of development of these period properties has been that of sympathetic extension, providing both additional accommodation and internal modernisation, whilst still respecting the authentic context of this original group. In conclusion, the Parish Council is therefore of the view that the proposal would be inappropriate to development in the Green Belt and, by demolishing the original building, would adversely impact on the street scene and the historic environment of which it is a part, contrary to policies DM4, DM7 and DM9 and policies within the NPPF. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have one more speaker, who is Jason Parker, who is the applicant's agent. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much and good evening. This application has received considerable scrutiny and extensive additional information has been provided, including case law examples. Number 28 was specifically excluded from the local listing assessment carried out in 2012. The building is not locally listed, not in a conservation area, and not grade listed. As such, there is no protection for demolition. I could demolish it now with no permission. Martin Goodall, planning barrister, writes and concludes on this matter, and even where buildings are locally listed, they are not protected from demolition, and that risk an award of costs at an appeal situation. As you've heard, the submitted proposal is not materially larger. There is only a 1.45% increase in floor area and an overall 25% volume increase. And that's what replacement dwellings are all about in the Green Belt. The decision requires a count of scale and volume of existing dwelling, and any redevelopment of the scale of extensions of buildings that could be added under permissive development rights should be taken into account as well. Our assessment shows that you could achieve more volume through permitted development. Policy DM4 specifically deals with development in the Green Belt, and Section C sets out exceptions. One exception includes replacement dwellings, which are materially larger. The question of being materially larger has been considered in great detail. Thereby, objections raised are flawed, and there is no planning policy basis for refusing permission for it being materially larger or demolition. In terms of openness, that's quite a key topic. And in fact, there is no requirement to comply with openness because that is only for further exceptions. And that's outlined in DM4 Section D of the policy. So replacement dwellings are an exception. In relation to the amenity upon neighbours, the planning officer has correctly reconfirmed that the proposed dwelling would not have harmful effects. And also, hopefully evidenced during your site visit, the property has been considerably remodelled, and there are issues with long-standing extreme rising damp resulting from forest water runoff and ingress. And there are significant drainage issues. Even if you were able to deal with them, there's no guarantees that that's going to last forever. It's significant issues. Our site is on lower ground as well than the number at 29, so there can't be any water issues from our site arising to next door. The architect's statement attests to authentic period credentials largely seen on existing building and extensively throughout Piercing Hill, whilst not appearing as a pastiche of the original. There is a benefit of this new dwelling being highly energy efficient and sustainable, fit for modern living and age-proofed, whereas the current property is poor in terms of its performance. So thank you very much for listening to me today.
Thank you. Okay, members, and thank you for those people who went along to the site visit a week or so ago. Do we have anybody who'd like to say anything, please? Councillor Phillip, again.
Thank you, Chairman. I was planning to listen to what other... First time over the fanfare where I've started to speak. I was going to listen to what other people had to say first, but since the people seem to be reluctant to start, I'll dive in at this. And I would agree with you right from the start. I found the site visit very helpful and very informative. It's not the first time I've been on a site visit on that site with this committee. The first time was quite a long time ago for the neighbouring property, and we're viewing it from that property. There's a number of things I think that need to be considered on this one. The agent said that this was specifically excluded from the assessment of local listing back in 2012. Well, fortunately, I happen to have been the planning portfolio holder in 2012 and can assure them that there was no significant update to the local list at that point because, as for many years thereafter, we were rather focused around getting the local plan in place. And I actually blame the local plan for a number of things, and this is one of them, is that it's occupied our planning team for sufficiently long that we haven't had an update to the local list for far, far too long. And that is something I will be taking up with my cabinet colleagues, that it's something that we do need to start working on. I think the key part is that there is no doubt in my mind that if we were to update the local list, the Manor Villas and Thaden Boyce would be a classic case for local listing. As the parish council pointed out, there are a significant number of these Manor Villas in Thaden Boyce stretching up that side of Piercing Hill, in fact going up the side of Piercing Hill where the old road was, not where the new road now is. And we haven't seen a removal of one of the Manor Villas, the property next to this, which was replaced a number of years back, was not in fact a Manor Villa that was replaced. It was another old house. There was a bungalow further down the hill that was replaced. That wasn't part of the Manor Villas either. I think what we have here is a very strong heritage item. It's something that when I was planning portfolio holder, I was speaking to the conservation officer as a potential for making the whole area a conservation area due to the historical value of things. It is true, as I said in the feedback from the conservation officer, that a lot of these manor villas have had modifications to them. And I think the parish council's got it absolutely right on this aspect, that sympathetic extensions and alterations to the existing buildings are a way to take this forward where we can actually preserve the historical value of it. I completely agree that the fact if you demolish it now, you never get it back. The agent said there was no guarantees that treatment for damp would go on forever. That is also true when you build a new house. There's no guarantees that when a house is constructed that everything works properly. We do need to remember as well that this house has been relatively recently purchased, and I'm sure at the time of purchase, given the asking price of the house, there was a significant survey done, so none of this should be coming as a surprise. It comes down to a number of other things. In terms of the impact on the green belt, 25% increase, I personally think that 25% increase is a significant increase in overall size, and therefore the openness does come into the factor here. I was also interested to hear mention of the Thaden Boyce Dark Skies policy, which was submitted as one of the pieces of evidence into the local plan. And it's true that increased glazing in a property will have an impact on that, and it will have an impact on neighbours in terms of that. I understand what the objector was saying about the impact to the neighbour. I think with the privacy screen in that was pointed out when we were on the site visit, I think that is probably a difficult argument to sustain, although I fully understand the difficulty of people overlooking the property. We did, if I'm correct, we did visit just about every window on the backside of the house during our site visit, so we do have a view of where that comes to. In the end, I do think this is actually an inappropriate development. It's difficult to go into too much detail about the embedded carbon in the construction of a building, particularly one of this age. But there is definitely a significant heritage aspect to this particular part of Thaden Boyce, and as such, I cannot support this. I will listen to my fellow colleagues, and if I get the appropriate opportunity at the end, Chairman, I may well come back and propose refusal.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have anybody else? Yes, Councillor Amos.
Thank you, Chairman. As the planning officer has admitted, the fact that this is not locally listed or has any listing of itself does not carry that much weight. It is a heritage property, as we have heard from the previous speakers, and we've also heard reference to problems from the agent with rising water, and Councillor Phillip has also alluded to this. 4 to 5 years ago, it was purchased, and I would be surprised if this problem has arisen in the last 4 to 5 years, and I'm surprised that the surveyor at the time did not make reference to it. We cannot let this building go. If it goes, it cannot be replaced. The Conservation Officer, in her report, has made, in my view, a very strong case for rejecting this particular application, and I fully concur with her report and her recommendations, and I would urge the committee to vote against this proposal. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor. Do we have Councillor McIver?
Thank you, Chairman. I really do sympathise with lots of the points on this, and I may disagree with some of my colleagues in the sense that I think this is a slightly more balanced application. My reason for saying that is a number of reasons. First of all, I can remember 5 years ago being told very clearly that we must always bear in mind we have to take into consideration planning reasons as to why a proposal should or shouldn't go ahead. And I think it's worth just pointing out that a planning consideration, as far as I'm aware, the point of which somebody or a company has bought a property is not a necessarily material planning consideration for us to consider. The chronology of a purchase of a property is not something to consider. Now, I'm always somebody that wants to defend heritage, and I believe in it wholeheartedly, and I sit here sometimes very frustrated when we look at new developments in historic towns in Epping Forest where there is absolutely no attempt at all to show any kind of sympathy towards the heritage of our district. So I find it very frustrating when such approvals take place. However, I think the committee should be minded to be a bit more pragmatic on the specifics of this particular application. The fact that it's not listed locally or nationally I think must be very frustrating for the parish council, for the objectors and perhaps councillors within Fade Boys. However, the reality is, and this was pointed out by the applicant's agent, is that the property could be demolished tomorrow. Might already have been demolished since the site visit. So whilst I appreciate that is a frustration, that is just the reality of the situation. In terms of the street scene, it's quite clear that properties either side, and I was pleased to drive past. I wasn't able to make the site visit, but I did take a look before the previous meeting last month. The properties either side are of a large size, and that was outlined by the graphic that we've shown in the presentation. The proposed dwelling fits the street scene. I appreciate it removes the heritage factor, but it does fit the street scene. So I'm quite mindful to support our officers with this in granting permission. Particularly because actually one could argue that the street scene can be enhanced when a new dwelling is built, and you only need to drive around the Epping Forest district to see that Georgian-style properties are becoming part of the future heritage of this district. I'm all about preserving our historic heritage. However, there is new trends, new design, new architecture, and that is ever prevalent across our entire district, whether you go to Chigwell, Abridge, Ongar. It is the new 21st century style of living. So I'm not against the idea of old properties being demolished, no matter how pretty they may look, in replacement for newer modern buildings. That is the reality of the future. I think it's a bit late when an application comes to a committee to start talking about whether something should be locally listed or not. That work, as Councillor Phillip quite rightly pointed out, should have been done many years ago. It hasn't been done, so we are where we are. So in terms of the planning considerations for this application, I'm very mindful to support it based on the facts within the report and the pragmatic situation we're in to this date. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. Unfortunately, I was not able to go to the site for this part of the site visits that we did the other day. I've got a question, clarification. We've had figures of 40% increase and 25% increase have been put about. Which is it? And also, is it correct that the new building will be 2 metres higher than the existing building, which in old-fashioned measurements is over 6 foot? This is on a hill, I know that, so you can't compare one exactly with the other, but just for clarification.
James, can you pick that up?
Yeah, of course. So the volumetrically, the dwelling is 25% larger than the current building that's on site. It's 40% or 41% larger in terms of its floor area. So that's that point. The dwelling is no higher than the existing. So the existing house has got a larger ridge, particularly with its projecting gable, but it does have a larger area of flat roof. But it is no larger than the existing in terms of its height.
Thank you. Does that answer your question? It does. Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for coming to me. As the county councillor for Faden Boys, I'm well aware of the unique character of Faden Boys, and I really think the heritage argument on this is the most important thing to consider. I do appreciate, as Councillor Phillip outlined very well, this isn't a listed building or a locally listed building, but I do feel that a real opportunity to make it one has been missed out on in recent years. I know Councillor MacGyver's comments, and as much as I love Chigwell, new Georgian-style buildings are a trend in Chigwell rather than in Faden Boys. And what I would say is this part of Faden Boys, Piercing Hill, has a really unique style. And I mean, I'm very passionate about local heritage. I was a history student many years ago, and I think Victorian buildings, once they're gone forever. In fact, I think of this site we're sitting on now, which used to be Victorian houses. You look back at the pictures, and it seems a travesty when you see those beautiful Victorian buildings lost. And this is a particularly beautiful from the outside. Certainly, I do appreciate the occupants' need to redesign and modernise within. But I wanted to add my voice and support to both the local ward councillors in going against officers' recommendations tonight, because I believe this is of unique character. I would like to see a local listing moving forward, and I don't believe this is sympathetic to the character of Faden Boys. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I'd like to reiterate what everybody else has said, in as much as that the site visit was extremely helpful on this occasion. Most site visits that we go on over and done within a couple of minutes, 2 or 3 minutes, have a good look round. This particular site, I would describe this house as a higgledy-piggledy house. It was, when we talk about the 40% or 41% of internal floor area, I can see why, because it had staircases that had been moved around. There were a lot of small nooks and crannies, very small rooms, and I can see why the owner really wants to pull this down. On looking at the actual reason, the reason behind it all with the flooding and the dampness, I have seen worse. I have seen a lot worse. I would say that it is possibly curable, but it needs a lot of money thrown at it. But there again, that is a big property in Faden Boys that's on the hill that's known to have a lot of water runoff from the rest of the forest. On balance, I'm sort of minded to listen to see if anybody else had any comments. I am sort of in the middle between supporting or not supporting this. I do think it is a sort of a heritage asset, but it has not been listed, as was quite clearly made out to us earlier on, and they could apply for a demolition order tomorrow. But what I would say is they may apply for a demolition order tomorrow and pull it down, but then it could revert back to Greenbelt, because it is a Greenbelt asset. I'm not sure about the MPPF on a status that was quoted earlier on about like for like, but one option there would be actually to keep the original structure, rip out all the internals, and perhaps remodel the existing so that you keep the facades to the outside. It is a difficult decision, and I know it's not going to please everybody, but I shall listen to what other members have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Do we have Councillor Phillip?
Thank you for letting me come back, Chairman. And I have listened to the things that have been said. I think there's a number of important things that need to be brought up. I appreciate what Councillor Bedford was saying about the property being capable of development, but then you don't have a building to replace. So it's not got the same weight within the green belt, and then openness does very much more come into it. Chairman, I think the key part is called out actually on page 64, where paragraph 203 of the NPPF talks about a non-designated heritage asset. I don't think anybody on this committee has said that this particular building as part of the Manor Villas is not a heritage asset. Therefore, we are considering it. And in weighing those applications that directly or indirectly affect them, balanced judgment will require, having regard to any scale of harm or loss. As the Conservation Officer points out at the bottom of page 63, there are 3 reasons why they think this is a bad idea. It's the loss of a specific non-designated heritage asset. It's the harm to the setting of the other locally listed buildings and harm the character of Piercing Hill. And Chairman, I would like to propose that we refuse the application on the basis of the loss of a non-designated heritage asset, the harm to the locally listed buildings, and the character and appearance of Piercing Hill.
Thank you. Do you have a seconder? I second it. Seconded by Councillor Amos.
Councillor McIver's very
And Councillor McIver, sorry.
else to say.
Sorry, Chairman, I don't think you saw my hand before Councillor Phillips spoke. I did have a question for Mr Rogers, if that's okay.
Yeah, sure.
Sorry, Mr Rogers, I just wondered if I could ask, if the applicant was to maximise on permitted development opportunities, of which I'm not familiar with, what would be the difference between maximising on permitted development and the application?
It's a good question. It's a difficult one to answer, just because what we would normally expect is that a certificate of lawfulness would be in place for that sort of thing, for us to consider it as a reasonable fallback position. You know, it's down to an applicant to determine what is what would be permissible, and the only way to be sure is to submit a certificate of lawfulness. I don't think it's covered in the report. But I do think it has had a conservatory in the past, so that would be discounted for any rear extensions. But frankly, it's not an easy question to answer, just because they don't have, as far as I'm aware, any certificate of lawfulness is in place, unless the report says otherwise. But I would just reiterate that members are looking at the application that's before them tonight, rather than going into the potential for permitted development extensions.
Thank you, James. Have you answered your question? Okay, so we go back to seconder is Councillor Amos. You're seconding the motion?
I'm seconding the motion.
Okay, so members, we now should vote on the motion to refuse the officer's recommendation of approving the application. Those in favour of the motion?
(11), Chairman.
Those against?
(5), Chairman.
Abstentions?
None, Chairman. I must have missed a hand for the approvals. It's 12-5. There's 17 of us here tonight.
Okay, so in which case the application is refused. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to the next one, which was the first one this evening, which is, by the way, you have 8 this evening, so we need to crack on. EPF 161/22, Thornbull Common Service Station, High Road, Thornbull Common, Epping, CM16 6LX, pages 9 to 16. Okay, so who is taking us through that? Gary?
That's me, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Hopefully everybody can hear me okay and can see the presentation. So this application is for the installation of a pod-like structure intended to be occupied by Greggs within the forecourt of the Thornwood Common Service Station. The application is before members since there is an objection from the Parish Council, who have registered to speak. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The site is an established petrol station situated along the high road between Thornwood and the M25 junction. The site benefits from an existing shop and car wash. In 2018, permission was granted for the permanent retention of 2 shipping containers on the site. The proposed new pod would be situated adjacent to the existing shop towards the rear of the site and would replace the existing shipping containers. This shows the existing elevations on the site. So this is the shop building here, and this is the car wash, and this is the shipping container here. The site is situated within the Greenbelt. Whilst a new building, this would be fairly modest in size and would replace the 2 shipping containers that were previously approved. The proposed building would not be materially larger than the 2 shipping containers and is not considered to have a great impact on the openness of the Greenbelt. Although shipping containers are not considered permanent buildings, consent has been given for their permanent retention in this instance, and as such, the proposal is not considered inappropriate development since it replaces these. This shows the proposed elevations of the site. It should be noted that this application is not for advertisement consent, so no approval is being given for any signage shown. The proposed pod is a modest building. Yeah. It's situated towards the rear of the site and would be a visual improvement when compared to the existing shipping containers. The pod would contain a small customer area. The kitchen. Oh no, sorry. This is the customer area. This is the counter, and then you have a kitchen and staff area here to the rear. This would complement the existing shop on site, and these are becoming more common within petrol stations throughout the country. These are the elevations of the proposed pod. Whilst relatively simple in design, this would be in keeping with the functional character of this site. And these are the other elevations. So the proposed pod would be open between 5 AM and 10 PM daily. The existing petrol station has unrestricted operating hours and is open 24 hours a day. The majority of trips to the pod would be linked to that of the existing petrol station, and there's been no objection from Essex County Council Highways regarding impact on highway safety or distribution. Neighbouring residents are sufficient distance away so that it is not considered that there would be any increased harm from over that of the existing petrol station. The Parish Council has raised concerns around litter and the proliferation of takeaways along this stretch of road. Neither of these are material planning considerations. Overall, the proposal is considered to be acceptable and is therefore recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Back to you, members.
Thank you, Greg. We have one speaker for this time, which is Sue DeLuca from Northfield Parish Council.
Thank you. Good evening, Chairman and members. As you will see from the officer's report, the Parish Council has objected on the following grounds and has the following concerns. Increase in vehicle movements to the site. This could increase from 450 to 800 over a very busy stretch of road, which has had a number of accidents in the past. There are planned housing developments at Thornwood and at Latten Priory, which will increase the traffic also between Thornwood and Hastingwood. There are already a number of fast food outlets from Upland Road to McDonald's, albeit some attached to the garages. We ask, is there another need for a Greggs outlet, especially as there is already one in Epping? In previous applications, McDonald's restaurants on the Hastingwood interchange was a 24-hour facility. This was turned down due to its impact on local residents. There is concern at the impact that the litter will have, as there is no plan in the application to deal with litter. And there is also concern regarding any proposals for signage, even though this could be in the future. It does seem that a Greggs advertising sign could be in the region of 5 metres high when you look at the initial proposals, and there's no details whether this could be illuminated. The Parish Council does feel that the proposal is detrimental to the neighbouring and adjacent residents. We have been advised by the closest residents, this includes the chairman of our planning committee, that they did not receive any notification regarding this proposal. Neither did they see the site notice on or adjacent to the site. However, if Epping Forest District Council are minded to grant this application, we ask that they ensure that there are adequate plans to deal with the litter, and also that the hours of operation could be amended to 6 a.m. to 10 p.m. for the benefit of the local residents, and definitely no 24-hour openings. Also, please would you look at removing the skip containers. Sorry, the shipping containers, should I say, not the skip containers.
Thank you. We have no other speakers on that, so over to members. Councillor Whitbread.
Thank you, Chairman, and Thornwood is within my district council ward, and I have a great deal of sympathy with the representations from the parish council. I will certainly be minded to object to this application tonight, but if other members aren't agreeable to that, I will be putting forward a number of conditions to strengthen the protection for neighbours, really. I mean, in terms of planning reasons, I'm concerned about the impact on the green belt, but most significantly the impact on the highways. As a county councillor for this area, there are a number of different issues, particularly around safety and some speeding challenges with previous accidents. I'd also be very concerned around the increase in vehicle movements. Whilst this is a cut through, it's very much a village and a community, and I would be very concerned about the impact on local residents. In terms of conditions which I think need to be taken into consideration when looking at this application, litter is already a significant problem around here, and I know Mr Waters and his wife go out on a regular litter picks down this stretch of road, and I think if possible, and I would take the officer's advice on this, a condition around litter picking by the Greggs would need to be put in place. And I'll seek advice on that. And then as well, in relation to the opening hours for delivery, I would also propose that that's moved to later in the morning to 6 a.m. To reduce the impact on residents. But if I could seek the officer's advice around a amendment on litter picking, that would be fantastic.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course. Oh,
yeah,
if
you can do that, please.
Yep, no problem. Yeah, it's always a slightly difficult one. This is obviously not an uncommon concern in anything like this. I'm sure members have dealt with many fast food takeaways, McDonald's, etc., where this litter issue does often come up. We have put conditions on. There are questions over the enforceability of those, or even the effectiveness of those. But certainly we can condition. I mean, the kind of condition that we've imposed on previous sites is that prior to the use of the building, sort of details are submitted about how the applicants would deal with the litter problem. Certainly, I have seen, for McDonald's example, which I never came to fruition in Loughton High Road. There was the proposals about having members of staff go out and pick up the litter and things like that. It's very difficult, certainly when you're talking outside of the site. We could potentially enforce litter picking within the site, but once you then venture out of the application site, you are then sort of out of the area where we control. So it is very difficult to enforce that without having legal agreements in place. But certainly there are, as I say, there are examples of conditions that we have put on seeking that detail, and that's what we would seek to enforce is their plans on dealing with litter. So that is certainly something we could add.
Councillor Whitley.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you for the officer's advice on that. I wonder whether, therefore, I could propose an informative condition that the occupant had a conversation with both the district and parish council to look at litter picking arrangements and to ensure the site and the area around it were looked at. I'll pass to Councillor Phillip, who has got an amendment on that.
Councillor Phillip.
I'll deal that one first. I have a question for the officer after that. But I would think that we could probably apply a condition that before the Greggs becomes active, they need to agree a litter strategy with the planning department. That I think encapsulates what Councillor Whitbread was saying. It also gives a little bit more strength in that it actually is a proper condition rather than informative. The question I wanted to ask the officer is the apparent mismatch between what was in the parish council's response, which is saying a suggestion of increase in movements from 450 to 800, and in the report itself saying that they expect 75% of the trips to the shop being as a result of people coming to the petrol station anyway. Can we just a bit of clarity on how many trips that we expect? I do a little other problem that if there's lots of fast food outlets between Upland Road and Harlow, why would they all be coming here? So I think we're trying to play both sides, but I'd like to know what the actual predictions around traffic is going to be.
Thank you. Graham, do you have any figures on that?
Yes, I'm just having a quick look through the. Obviously, we've had a HRA submitted, largely around the obviously impact on the FSAC, but obviously it is useful because it provides the AADT for the sites. So yeah, it does say in here that the AADT, is, I saw the figure here. Apologies. So yeah, so 494 it appears to be suggesting. Sorry, apologies. It's quite complicated. I'm just trying to work out if because this is where it's slightly difficult because, as I say, the HRA is about impact on the FSAC. So there is obviously talks about right turn traffic. So I'm not 100% certain if the 494 is just the right turn traffic or the entire level of traffic. But it says here, forecast for the site 518. Then there is 806. It's, in all honesty, it's not the clearest in this for me to try and determine what it says, what this is showing. But yeah, it certainly says in here that the percentage of link trick is expected to be as high as 75%. As I say, otherwise, my fallback is obviously we've consulted ethics. They've obviously looked at the information that's been provided and they are satisfied that there will not be any detrimental impact. I'm not sure I can give you any firm figures without interrogating this quite thoroughly, unfortunately. So I'm gonna rely on the Essex County Council response, I'm afraid, on this one.
Thank you, Graham. Councillor Phillips.
If I can just come back. Thank you. I'm not sure quite how helpful that was, Mr. Courtney, but I think what we have to remember here is that what we have is a petrol station on a road, and it will keep generating vehicle movements whether we like it or not, because it is a petrol station. Looking at the other parts of this application, I think from a viewpoint it's quite useful to get rid of the shipping containers on site because they're not a thing of great beauty. I would just like to make sure, as well as the condition that I'm Councillor Whitbread modify, that we make it clear in the conditions that this permission is not granting any permission for the signage that was shown on the plans. I'm just a little bit worried that the condition number 2, which calls out the various elevations and plans that are in there, might inadvertently give planning permission for that sign. As long as we're looking at the place itself and not that signage, I'm on balance content with this, with the suggestion that Councillor Whitbread had of the condition around the litter, and also the proposal that we make the hours of operation from 6 till 10 rather than 5 to 10. I do see that extra hour in the morning could be quite significant for residents there. But I would like just reassurance that we're not granting permission for a honking big sign as part of this.
Thank you.
Yeah, happy to reassure you. Obviously, any advertisements do require their own separate advertisement consent. We wouldn't condition that, but we have suggested an informative, which is number 9, for the second informative in the agenda, which does clearly say this permission does not grant advertisement consent for the associated signage. A separate advertisement consent application should be submitted. So they absolutely 100% need to provide that.
Thank you. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm not going to repeat many of the points been made. Very supportive of anything that can be done to do with litter picking. Happy to support that. I agree it's a big issue on that road, particularly with McDonald's as well. So that anything that can be done on that, excellent. With regards to the actual application, I don't have many issues with it. Good to have reassurance on the sign. One thing I did want to just mention was with regards to the opening hours. I do share sympathy with residents on that. However, I would just like to draw the committee's attention to a slightly different perspective, which is if you're a shift night working nurse at the NHS, it's very frustrating. I know this because many people in North Wales do work at Princess Alexandra. It's very frustrating to have to wait in the McDonald's car park for 40 minutes because you're too exhausted to go home and cook. And I've had first-hand experience of talking to people about that. So I think it is just worth bearing that in mind. Small Greg's outlet, I can't see it being a huge destination at 5 o'clock in the morning for antisocial behaviour, which would be my concern. I think it's very different to a McDonald's or a KFC type environment. But, you know, I'm happy to hear other people's views on that. But I'm quite happy to support the application.
Thank you, Councillor McIver. Now we have Councillor Burrows.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I can't support this application. I think it's going to be a step too far because I know the area quite well. It's in my ward. They have considerable problems with litter already. They have considerable problems with traffic already. And actually, Rye Hill Road is quite a problem, which is just a few way down from there. Probably I'd like to see the hours actually limited a bit more, from say 7 AM to 2000 hours, if it has to go through. But I won't be supporting it. I'm sorry.
Thank you. We have Councillor Whitbread again.
Thank you. Conscious that we haven't gone to the vote on the 2 conditions, so just wanted to see if we could go for a vote both on the litter strategy condition but also the change in operation hours. And whilst I'm very sympathetic with Councillor Burrows wanting to bring them later, which is what I'd want in an ideal world, I think that might be difficult. What I would say, just in response to Councillor McIver's comments, I think it's more around the impact of the increased vehicles going onto the site, not so much the anti-social behaviour, but also the light and the delivery vehicles disturbing residents, because there are a number of residential properties around there. So if possible, I'd like to go for votes on those 2 conditions. Thank you. I think I need a seconder on the hours of operation.
Okay, before that though, Councillor McCann had his hand up. Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Chair. So I, like Councillor Burrows, I know this area very well indeed. This is a particular choke point. There is 1 lane each way. There's no filter to get into the there's no filter lane to get into this petrol station. During peak hours, so we're sort of talking school runs and rush hour, it's exceptionally difficult to get down this road. There have been a number of accidents down on this road. I don't think we should be supporting an application that will increase any vehicles going into this site. So, like Councillor Burrows, again, listen to others, but I'm minded to refuse at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. So, I think we're at a point where the two amendments or conditions need to be commented on or voted on. And you've already stated those. That is, the first one is the condition regarding litter picking and their strategy, the garage's strategy in doing it. The other one is changing the opening hours from 5 to 10 in the evening to 6 in the morning to 10 in the evening.
Chairman, can we take it as one vote for the two conditions?
Certainly. So those who agree and would like to support those two conditions, please raise your hand.
(15), Chairman.
Those against?
1, Chairman. 1 abstention.
Okay, thank you. So those conditions are accepted. So I guess we go to the vote now, whether to support the officer's recommendation to approve this application at Thornwell Garage. Those in favour?
Plus the two conditions. 12, Chairman.
Those against?
5, Chairman.
Abstaining?
Should be none.
None. Okay, so the application is granted. Thank you. Okay. The next one, EPF 2408/22, land at Church Lane, Shearing, pages 17 to 28. The officer's recommendation is to approve. So who takes us through that, Gary? Mo?
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be presenting this item. So item 9 relates to land at Church Lane in Shearing. The proposal is for the change of use of an agricultural field to a dog walking field, which is a sui generis use. Now this item is before members as the council has received more than 5 objections. Just turning to the slides. So over here we have the location plan. So the application site consists of the elements outlined in red, so over here, and this small section over here, and the blue line refers to the land under the ownership of the applicant. On the right hand side we have the proposed site plan. So over here is the proposed parking area. This is the existing access which will be upgraded. And you have new fencing across the site, including a new hedge over here and fencing. So here's an aerial view of the site. And the access point is over here. There's a closer aerial view. So the access point is over here. Here's the proposed access slash visibility plan. So we have the access over here. Part of this proposal is to set back the existing hedge some 3 meters from the edge of the carriageway. So this green line denotes the new hedgerow to be planted over here. And this hatched area over here is the existing hedgerow which would be cut. Here's an example of the proposed fence, fencing and gating plan. So the full merits of the scheme are set out within the report, and I'm just going to summarize the key points of this scheme. So number one, the proposal, it preserves the openness of the green belt, so there's no material impact in that regard. The second one is in terms of highway safety, these issues have been resolved as shown on this slide. So there would be no impact to the safety operation of the highway network. Condition 12 limits the operating hours of the site, including the number of customers and dogs permitted, which is 2 customers per booking and a maximum of 6 dogs. So there will be no material impact to neighboring amenities in terms of noise and general disturbance. And the last matter is relating to local wildlife. This is to be addressed via condition 3. So the applicants will be required to submit a construction environmental management plan, which is detailed in condition 3. And for those reasons, officer recommendation is to grant approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we have 2 speakers on this one. The first one is Mr. Alan Brooks, who's an objector. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Good evening. My name is Alan Brooks of Pondfield Church Lane. I'm speaking for 6 neighbours and the Harlow Badger Trust. We object to the dog walking field on the grounds of safety, pollution and ecological grounds. Church Lane is a very narrow lane where it is difficult in places for 2 vehicles to pass. The proposed site is directly after 2 90-degree bends. If as intended, the site is open 7 days a week, 365 days a year. When fully booked, that is an extra 300 plus cars per week. As a paddock, maybe that's 7 to 10 journeys a week. That number of extra cars on an already narrow road with poor sightlines in place is not needed. The applicant's own photos show how bad the congestion can be at times. There are already 6 other dog exercising fields locally from Harlow to Bishop Stortford. This one is not necessary. Better gate access parking on the site will encourage youngsters to park up at night in an unlit off-road situation where antisocial behaviour and drugs could be used, as was the case behind the church hall in Church Lane not so long ago. This makes us feel vulnerable. We also object on behalf of the protected species who live on this field, in conjunction with the Harlow Badger Trust, who have ascertained there are 4 to 5 interconnecting sets with the tunnels extending from the boundary ditch up to 20 feet into this field. That could be housing between 15 and 20 animals in the breeding season. The badgers are there because the horse paddock has an entirely different ecosystem and variety of invertebrates and small mammals to that of the surrounding arable field where there is a monoculture system. To fence them out of their historic feeding grounds is not good environmental policy for the badgers. I hear about the mitigation, but I don't hear about the protection. It seems to me it is pointless to protect the species and then fence them out of their main food source because they are inconvenient. This field runs for more than 50 yards immediately adjacent to my garden, and now speaking on a personal level, we are an elderly couple that have lived here for 45 years and spend most of our recreation time in our garden. The increased disruption from barking dogs and noisy owners to me and my neighbours 7 days a week, every day of the year and changing on the hour will have an extremely adverse effect on our lives. We will have no quiet time. As an internet-based business, this will not provide any rural jobs, and so therefore I respectfully ask you to reject this application.
Thank you. Now we have Stuart Wells, who's the applicant's agent, who's coming in via Teams.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I trust you can hear me. Quite simply, this is an application for one field to allow dog walkers to walk their dogs in a safe and controlled environment. It includes a small parking area with grass protection matting and new boundary fencing. It is a small-scale proposal which will help alleviate pressures on other open spaces in light of increased dog ownership. Typically, there'll be 1 to 2 people on site with 1 to 2 dogs per booking. There is nothing more to it than this. This is not in any way an intense use of the site. The proposed hours of opening control the level of use, with similar hours having been considered perfectly acceptable by other local planning authorities and planning inspectors across the UK. Any noise and activity would be no different to people walking their dogs past one's own house, or using a public park, or a dog in a neighbour's back garden. The only difference here is the council's ability to control the level of use. There is no effect on greenbelt openness, with the proposed discrete wire mesh fencing common in rural areas, open in appearance, and which would be seen with the backdrop of the existing hedgerow. The fence would ordinarily qualify as permitted development, where there would be no control over the type of fencing that could be put up. Highway experts have demonstrated and agreed with the local highway authority that the access is safe, with adequate visibility achieved in all directions. To investigate concerns regarding a nearby badger set, my client commissioned a professionally qualified ecologist to undertake a badger survey to find the set and assess the impacts from this proposal. And the factual evidence from this survey reveals that the active badger set actually lies beyond the application site and not on my client's land. Whilst my client was originally unaware of the presence of the set, following professional advice, they are proposing precautionary measures to protect and prevent potential disturbance and interaction between badgers and dogs. This includes amending the application by moving the dog field away from the set, creating a minimum 10-metre buffer, and including additional boundary treatment in this location with a living willow hedge and fence. The buffer area will be left to overgrow, providing further separation to the set, further cover and foraging habitat for badgers. And the fencing posts for the dog field will also be placed away from any underground set tunnels. The council's ecologist has reviewed the survey and agrees that all proposed precautionary measures will avoid any impacts on the set, raising no objection. As your planning officers therefore conclude there would be no harm to the badger set, and I agree with the overall professional view of your planning officers that the proposal is not harmful and is in full accordance with planning policies and should be granted planning permission. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Morgan.
Thank you, Chairman. First of all, I must say I strongly object to this application for 3 main reasons. First of all, the traffic. You've heard from Mr Brooks, the increase in traffic is tremendous about all these cars going in there and out, up to 48 journeys per day, it could be. This is a narrow country lane and right on a sharp double bend, the entrance to the field. The second reason is the badger sets. Although they're on Mr Brooks's land, the sets actually run into this field by about 20 metres. It is illegal to even interfere in any way with any of these sets. As a farmer, if we have them on our land, we have to go round them. You can't even drive over them. They will be putting fencing stakes through these sets in the actual field itself. And of course, the third reason is the loss of amenity to Mr Brooks and his neighbours of all these dogs there at night. Night, it'll be 8 o'clock to 8 in the summertime. It'll be 12 hours a day. And so I strongly ask the committee to support the Mr Brooks's reasons and my reasons for rejecting this application.
Thank you. Do we have any more speakers to Councillor Bedford.
Thank you, Chairman. It's quite a difficult one. It's a very emotive subject, isn't it? Dog walking and the use of this particular field. I have some sympathy with both the applicants trying to make better use of it and also with the councillors who have made good representation here this evening. One point I would like to ask her, if they go down the route of approval, there seems to be, I believe there's something missing from conditions, and that needs basically a dog waste strategy, because I know what's going to happen. Everyone says that, yes, okay, take the waste home. It's not going to get taken home. It's going to get thrown to the side. Then we get plastic pollution as well. I think they need to work with the town or parish council to sort out a dog waste strategy for this particular area if it goes to approval. But at the moment, I'm just waiting to see if anybody else wants to comment.
Okay. Councillor Kester, please.
Thank you, Chairman. There's a couple of things that worry me about this application. The first is the access. It's between two 90-degree bends on a very narrow road, and I think the access is in completely the wrong place for this field. The second is the badgers. I appreciate badgers are protected, and if the badgers are now going to be kept out of the field deliberately, that is going to affect them. Badgers are pretty good at digging things up and getting through things. I think if their attempts are made to stop them getting in, they'll find a way of making a hole to get into. And the next thing we might hear of course, is a number of dogs going down the badger sets and having to be dug out. So that, again, I'm very unhappy with. I think dog walking should be kept as far away from badger sets as you possibly can. So on both of those two reasons, I must admit, I would be against this application as it is submitted.
Thank you. Do we have a yes? We have. Councillor Payne.
Chairman, as Chair of Parish Council, we approved this and said that we didn't have any objections, and that was before anything was in evidence about badgers being present on the site. And then at the meeting where Councillor Morgan was present, when this was raised, other members of the Parish Council actually said that they wouldn't have voted for it had they have known about the badgers there. We supported it because we liked it as an amenity actually for the village. We've got a busy road, we've got narrow pavements, people try to walk their dogs along there. It would be an amenity for them rather than walking them across the fields, which, I mean, there are plenty of fields to walk around shearing, I can tell you. But we did support it first of all, but we were worried about the badgers when we considered it again.
Thank you. Anyone else? We have Councillor Morgan, please. Seconded by Councillor MacGyver. What did you propose? I
propose that this application is refused.
Yeah, that's what I thought you said. Okay. Seconder is Councillor MacGyver. Those who agree in opposing the...
Yeah, I would say you need reasons.
For the reason, sorry. Councillor Kessler.
Oh, sorry. Thank you, Chairman. Well, first of all, the access, which I think is in a dangerous location, and secondly, the situation with regard to the badgers on site and the problems that will cause. The noise is perhaps a third problem. And if the application had been for more limited hours during the day, that could well have been more acceptable. But I think the hours as suggested at the moment could be a bit too long. But certainly I'm putting forward as reasons the access and the location of the badgers.
Lack of amenity of the neighbours.
Sorry, who said that?
Me. Lack of amenity of the neighbours.
Okay, that was mentioned, yeah. Okay, so we've got the reasons for... Councillor Philip, you want to come in?
Thank you. Yes, I just need to say a couple of things. I understand where the councils are coming from, but we have an ecology team report in here which says that the badger problem is not an issue. We have a Highways Authority approval which says this is reasonable. I find it very difficult, given those strong officer comments, to support those reasons for refusal.
Okay, thank you. We still have a motion there to refuse based on those 1, 2, 3 conditions. Those in favour, please raise your hand.
Chairman.
Against?
5, Chairman.
And abstaining.
2. 2, Chairman.
Okay, so that application is refused. Thank you. Okay, the next item is EPF 2490/22, the Orchard Finglath Hall Lane, High Onga, CM4 0JP, pages 2942. And that is being taken through by Gary.
No idea.
We don't have anybody.
Ian
Chair, it's me, Ian H.
Okay, Ian, thank you.
Okay, so this is site of the Orchard, a sprawling residential property on about 0.35 of a hectare, comprising the dwelling and the outbuildings. The site abuts a recently redeveloped site of dwellings that was previously a stables and a riding school, and all of the land on both areas lies within the green belt, near the eastern boundary of the district. So the existing buildings on the site, I would describe as sprawling. It comprise certainly the main dwelling, um, a, a, a residential accommodation in the southeast corner, that was probably originally an annex, and extensive outbuildings. Also visible in the shot is the extent of the existing hard surfaces, and to the rear of the existing building, the funny coloured green bit is a swimming pool, and all that area there is hard surface as well. And that gives a slightly different angle, showing the access and the buildings. These are the existing elevations. You can see the buildings comprise the main house is two-story elements, chalet elements, extensions to the rear, from the side extension. So, as I said, the buildings are extensive and sprawling. So the application proposes to replace these with 6 new dwellings, all of which are two-story in 2 different forms, which I'll show in a minute. The site access is repositioned to a location on the crown of the bend at the highways have supported. All houses have gardens, and there are public areas and landscaping to the frontages. So the houses, there's effectively 2 types, 4 of one and 2 of the other, and they're mixed material of brick, cladding, and tiles. So going back to the layout plan, in Greenbelt terms, the site clearly meets a general definition of previously developed land. The report includes a comparison between the built form existing and proposed, and this demonstrates a significant reduction in the hard standing and a small decrease in the built footprint, countered by a significant increase in planting and soft landscaping, an increase in built volume of around 25%. Had this volume been proposed by way of extensions, it would meet the criteria normally applied to limited extensions. So with the enhancements, particularly in the soft landscaping quality and quantity, development is considered to satisfy Greenbelt policy. In amenity terms, the new adjoining houses have been considered and direct impact is limited. The new buildings on this site are detached, so avoid a clustering of built form in terraces or similar, and for the most part, there are flank to rear relationships, but otherwise the houses immediately to the rear are separated by the access road. So there's good separation around the site. So our view is that this provides a satisfactory level of daylight to all adjoining properties. The access position, as I already mentioned, has been agreed with highways. Section 106 is agreed in principle to deal with impact on the FSAC, and given the location, this is air quality vehicle movements impact only. In conclusion, therefore, the scheme is considered to fit with the character of the immediate surroundings, meets general policy criteria, including the green belt, and has limited direct impact. And on that basis, the application is recommended for approval. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Okay, we have three speakers on it. The first one is Simon Cornwall, who's a rejecter, who's coming in via Teams. Simon, if you're there.
I am here. Can you hear me? Can you all hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah. Good evening, everybody. Yeah, I'm Simon Cornwell, and I'm representing the residents of Little Riding Lane, which obviously is in close proximity of the application. There's a number of areas which I'd like to raise, which I feel need to be considered in my rationale around the objection. Firstly, which I believe you've covered, but I think it's crucial that the access is enforced access from the front road only, not from the back. Currently, on the development that we currently live on Little Ridings Lane, which is sort of 3 years in age from when most residents moved in, we have continued diggers and trucks that come down that lane, reversing into the property which is in question at the moment in terms of development, which creates damage to the road, has created damage to the landscape and the road. So that's a real major concern of ours, that enforcement will not be followed because diggers and trucks are continually doing that at the moment. Also, there's a real strain on the amenities. Since we moved in, all the residents in the last 3 years, we continually, which I'm sure you guys can investigate, have regular drops in our water pressure. We have regular power cuts on a continual basis. There are too many houses linked to the private waste sewage system that the dwelling of Little Ridings Lane fall into. So there's real concerns that additional dwellings, no matter what satisfactions that you guys have provided, for those of us that are living in brand new properties on this estate at the moment, there are a real strain on the amenities, and it's going to continue to cause hardship for all. There's already insufficient parking on the estate for the residents already in situ. This clearly is going to be under more strain with these new dwellings. The current existing visitor spaces are used regularly by commercial vans, landscapers, and other forms of transport. That will only increase without doubt with the work that's going on and if this application is put forward. The diggers and trucks will also cause danger to the children. One of the main attractions for all of us investing heavily and all the social housing that's there at the moment from the development. It's a family environment. There's lots of young children that can play out, I believe, in safety in its current format. However, there's also at the moment real issues. Vehicles are entering into that road at continual speeds and no awareness to the children and families that are playing. Trucks, which we all visualise, a lot of us work from home. We see lorries, diggers, trucks coming down at speeds. Real danger to the youngsters and families that have moved into this, into Little Ridings Lane. And there's real concerns there. And I think the council need to take that in consideration as a real safety issue. There's also been an ongoing leak in Fingriff Lane Hall, adjacent to the 3 properties at the front of the site. This has been going on for 3 years plus. We've had over 2 years, it's been unresolved by Ability Water. The road has been dug up.
Mr. Cornwall, if you could wind up, please. Thank you.
Okay, and that's continued not been resolved. Also, there's a real issue that the amenity land at the back of the development, which we all bought into when we purchased the property, has still not been finished and it's not near completion. So our concerns are that this new development will only detract from that ever being finished.
Thank you.
They are my real concerns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. We have the next speaker, who is Susan Luca, speaking from Highonga Parish Council, Lucan Clark.
Good evening again, Chairman and members. Unfortunately, the clerk at Highonga Parish Council retired early in March. Due to a number of factors, it is understood that he may not have sent you the Parish Council's comments to this planning application. At their Parish Council meeting a week ago, it was brought to their attention that no comments had been put forward to the planning officer on this application. As such, I've agreed to represent Hyonga Parish Council at this meeting whilst their clerk is being trained. So on their behalf, I would like to thank you for this opportunity of advising you of their comments. There's concern at land contamination due to the previous use of the land, the loss of the hedgerows and impact to the trees on the site. The Parish Council believes it is inappropriate development in the green belt and will have a greater impact on what is already there. The development is somewhat sprawling in nature because of the built volume. Concern at the ingress and egress to the site and the proximity to the bend in the road due to the volume of traffic and the visual impairment. There would need to be considerable changes to accommodate this. There's also concern to the parking. There are considerable sewage and flooding issues that need to be resolved still. There's lack of infrastructure to the site, including lack of pavement, lack of social housing on site and overdevelopment in general to the site. That's what their main concerns have been. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. And lastly, we have the applicant's agent, who's Matthew Wood. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you very much. Good evening to members. As you all note, the site currently consists of extensive existing buildings and hard standing, with the site comprising previously developed land. Prior to the submission of this detailed planning application, the applicant has undertaken extensive pre-application discussions with the officers to ensure an acceptable redevelopment scheme for the site can be achieved. As confirmed by the officers, a comparison of the existing and proposed building quantums indicates a reduction in overall built footprint and hard standing, which is balanced with some increase in built volume. However, the officers have concluded that any increase in volume is more than balanced by the decrease in the footprint and hard standing, with the more open layout of development providing a break in the built form in comparison to the existing mass and form. Accordingly, these proposals would comply with local and national Greenbelt planning policy. The proposed redevelopment also presents extensive opportunities for new soft landscaping in the form of open spaces to public areas and enhanced tree planting, as depicted by the submitted drawings. The proposed redevelopment has been carefully designed and laid out to ensure its high quality as well as a compatible relationship with neighbouring land uses. This includes achieving a good level of amenity for existing and future occupiers of the land. Each new plot also includes off-street car parking and private amenity space in line with the Council's adopted standards. The Officers' Committee report also confirms the acceptability of these proposals in all other planning-related aspects in line with the adopted local plan requirements, including in relation to biodiversity, drainage, flood risk and highways. There were no objections from any statutory consultees, and although some public representations have been received on this application, the officers have fully addressed these within their committee report and recommend that this detailed planning application should be granted accordingly. In conclusion, the applicant is strongly of the view that these proposals are a high quality and sustainable form of redevelopment within the meaning of the local plan and the MPPF. This includes full acceptability and compliance with local and national planning policy in respect of greenbelt, design, amenity, biodiversity, drainage, flood risk, highways and parking. The applicant therefore urges the members to endorse the officer's recommendation and grant planning permission accordingly. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members. Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm very familiar with this site as it falls within my county division. And firstly, I'm in no doubt that this particular piece of land should be developed at some point. My main concern looking at this is the access. I appreciate the highways report, but my concern is that you've already got the new development, which is a very high quality, good development, and actually a good example of good development in the Greenbelt. But then you have a number of vehicles moving in and out of a road that perhaps the graphic here doesn't show. This is a road that is on quite a bend and there is poor visibility. I think to have another entrance and access point so close to one that's literally just down the road, I think is a concern for me. I think there must be a way forward whereby a development here, if approved, could have access from the neck of the road, the junction of the road with the existing new development, but not using the new development for access, but using that main entrance to the road, which would be just a change of the plans presented. In terms of what's presented today, you can just see my point here. So if you look at the screen, you've got the houses of the new development with their access. You've then got that small sort of green space, and then you'll have the junction to this proposed application. I just think on that bend, having two entrances to that road, I have concerns about that. In regards to the application in front of us today, I think it makes sense to have development here because the existing site is, I think, letting the whole aesthetics of that area down. I think it is something that needs to happen. I'm just not necessarily sure that the current proposals in front of us are the right ones, but there definitely needs to be development on this site because I think it will upgrade the whole area. So it'll be very interesting to see what members think about not just the access, but the current proposal.
Thank you. Councillor Malcolm.
Thank you, Chair. The first thing I'd like to bring up is the Parish Council's late objection. I think that actually puts another view on this application. I have noted the things about land contamination, green belt, rear access to the site, which seems to be a concern from everybody who spoke tonight. I feel that the only way forward for this is to go for a site visit on this site now, so we all get a decent look at it, because with the transport and other things, I think it's crucial.
Thank you. I mean, I'm also concerned about the position of that. It's on a blind bend, the very worst sort of roads to pull out of, I know. We have Councillor Bedford.
I totally agree with Councillor Balcom. I think I'm happy to second a site visit on this particular one. On looking on Street View, it's actually, you can see where the old entrance is, which is what's being proposed there. I'm also worried about the tree landscaping to the front there, which is going to add additional burden to actually, when that matures, the screening of the bend as you go around the bend. So I think we need to see it in its context when we're on site.
If I could just say a quick word here. I mean, I'm not averse to a site visit, though I don't fancy, I'm not sure I need to do it, because this used to be Norton Heath Equestrian Centre, so I spent a lot of my time here, so I'm quite familiar with it. As far as I can remember, all the green screening at the front of the site proposed today is all Leylandi, as far as I can remember, all Leylandi that have got out of control. So if I'm correct on my memories, which does go back a few years, I assume that the idea would be to get rid of that, and then I think you'd find that the sight lines are way, way improved. But I'm going back a few years, quite a number of years actually, so perhaps I'm mistaken there. I hear everything that the parish council said and that the objectors said, but sadly, water pressure, sewage treatment, whether the other green area has been properly developed for children's play area, I don't think is actually relevant. They're not planning reasons to relate to this. I know it's difficult for people's lives, but in actual fact, that's some other departments to deal with that, I think. But I'm not averse to a site visit, so that's fine. Thank you.
Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. Quick one. I know I'm not going to put it forward now in view of the fact that it looks as if we're probably going to have a site visit, but I noted the the comments that there was a risk of the builders' trucks coming in to the existing estate and going in. When it does come back, would it be possible to make a condition that said that the new entrance would have to be put in place first and all construction traffic go in through the new entrance rather than through the estate? Thank you.
Thank you. So we come to a vote on site visit. We have a proposer and a seconder. Those in favour?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So that will be a site visit, and the application will appear again at the next available meeting after the site visit. Okay, so the next item is right, EPF 2874/22, 8 Kimpton's Close, Ongar, CM5 0BQ, pages 43-50, which was subject to a site visit a few weeks ago.
Thank you, Chair. We'll be taking this one. So item 11 relates to 8 Kimpton Close in Ongar. This item was deferred from the 5th July meeting for a member site visit, which took place last Wednesday. The proposal is for a 3-bed detached dwelling. This is a revised scheme to a previous consent. The main change is the addition of a rear box dormer and internal layout. And yeah, so this is what members will be determining today, whether the additional dormer is harmful or not. This application was before members previously due to some 12 neighbour objections received. Turning to the slide. So here's the location plan. Here's the site outlined in red. Here's the donor house number 8. And there's an existing footpath over here. Here's an aerial view of the site. So here's the approved and proposed site plan. So on the left-hand side, we have the approved scheme. So this shows the proposed ground floor layout. And on the right-hand side is the proposed scheme before members today. It may not be clear, but there are some internal changes. So the approved scheme is more open plan at the ground floor. Whereas over here, you've got a separate living room and kitchen dining area. But the footprint is the same as approved, including the garden size. Here's a detailed plan of the approved and proposed floor plans. So on the top, we have the approved floor plans. So this layout is an open plan layout. And you have the 3 bedrooms over here. And this is the donor property number 8. At the bottom, we have the proposed plans before members today. So this is the new dwelling. So it has a separate living room over here. And a kitchen and dining area over here. And on the right hand side is the first floor plan. So you have the first bedroom over here with a dressing area. The second bedroom over here. And this would be a study room over here. And here's the proposed loft plan. So this is the application site, the new dwelling, and the third bedroom would be located over here. Here are the approved elevations. So this is the approved dwelling over here. This is the rear view. And this is the front elevation. here are the proposed elevations. So again, this is the front elevation. No material change other than the 2 new roof lights proposed over here. And here's the proposed rear elevations. So the main change is the addition of this rear box dormer. There is an existing rear box dormer at the donor property over here. And no additional flank windows are proposed and approved. So here is the front elevation. So this is number 8 over here. And the new dwelling would go over here. So it will turn this into a row of 3 terraces. Here's the public right of way. As you can see, I screened quite heavily. So the new dwelling would sit on this side. And on the other side over here, we have number 36 Springfield Close. Here's the rear elevations. So this is the donor house number 8. This is the existing dormer and the recent extensions carried out. And here's another dormer further down. So just summarizing the merits of the scheme, the full merits are set out within the agenda. However, just to summarize this, the main change is the addition of the rear dormer. This is what members would be considering today, whether it's harmful in terms of the character, including neighboring amenities. Given what's present before members on this slide, officers are satisfied with the scheme in terms of design and impact on neighbors. And for those reasons, officers are recommending granting permission subject to a completed Section 106 legal agreement. Yeah, thank you, Chair. That's the end of the presentation.
Thank you. We have 2 speakers on this. First one, Mrs. Carol Graham, who's a rejecter in person. Thank you. 3 minutes.
Right. I speak for the Kingston Group and we wish to object to the proposal on the grounds of lack of parking provision, traffic and parking congestion. On page 46, under the planning considerations, it said that our objections raised included matters not related to the proposal, but these matters are very much related because if you approve this proposal tonight, the property can be built with 6 bedrooms, have 6 tenants, 6 vehicles, and it will then be another HMO. The planning considerations also said that if this proposal is not approved because of the parking issues, permitted development rights for an HMO conversion can be removed. This is what we are asking for, please. The host house does not have any additional parking provision, yet allowing it to be built as a HMO meant there are up to 6 tenants, all with vehicles, all trying to park in the vicinity. Before the existing HMO conversion, a parking report was done based on a C3, a 3-bed house. Now this is a 6-bed HMO with the potential of becoming a 12-bed across 2 houses, and it is fair to assume that the 6 new tenants at number 8 will all have vehicles because the transport links are so poor, with the tube being over 8 miles away. Kimpton Close is a small close with 9 houses in, 2 of which could be HMOs, so to think that all existing residents and 12 tenants of number 8 would be able to park is ludicrous. There is already a great deal of pressure on parking, especially because of the primary and preschools being so close. There is much concern in the community about excessive parking and traffic, with parents having to park up on pavements, making access for prams and wheelchairs difficult. The area is crowded with vehicles, and the worry is that child safety is being put at risk, and emergency services would not be able to access the houses or schools. Residents struggle every day trying to park nearby. Arranging the site visit in the school holidays meant you would not have seen the hazards caused by excessive parking, especially as most of the tenants appeared to be away on the night of the scheduled visit. We do also reiterate all other objections raised, like the destruction of a healthy blossom tree. The build is out of character and in an already overdeveloped area, and our privacy will be vastly impacted because the back of the new house will be so close and high, tenants will be able to see directly into our homes and gardens. And we also object on the grounds that this application should be made void, as the developer submitted a proposal with details of Broxbourne in Hertfordshire and not on Ongar in Essex, but this was not noticed by the planning department. and no site notice has ever been posted in the area. We do also object about having HMOs with all the antisocial behaviour and problems associated, as already proven with the existing house, and no due diligence being carried out to safeguard against who actually lives there. A previous resident was jailed for 27 years for child sex offences. Safeguarding our children is high on our list of objections, so cannot be classed as not related to this proposal. Finally, on the grounds of traffic and lack of parking provision, we ask that you reject this proposal outright, thus preventing it from becoming another 6-bedroom HMO, which will definitely increase parking congestion. Thank you.
Thank you then. Now we have one more speaker, Councillor Jason Gunn from Ongar Town Council.
Thank you, Chairman. Good evening, councillors. Following the concerns raised by the local resident councillors and the communication between the Kimpton Neighbours Group to our Chair of Planning in support of the neighbours' concerns with the proposed developments and the impact of vehicle parking. Excuse me, sorry. Currently there is limited parking, and with the proposed development this would increase parking further. Currently there are public parking spaces. This is a small close 9 houses. This will increase the pressure on present residential parking. There appears to be no access in front of the proposal. If it does, it would lead to a further increase in the parking numbers, which would have impact on other residents' parking and potentially neighbouring streets in Ongar. There's a school nearby within this residence. Parents' carers parking during drop-off and pick-up times may be impacted by the increased parking too. Awareness of children and young people with an increase in parking, which could have an impact on local roads and safety. Increased traffic and congestion could lead to further traffic pollution. The needs of all residents' well-being needs to be considered in the surrounding area. Although there is references to the Ongar Neighbourhood Plan's proposal, there needs to be consideration with the parking. Thought needs to be considered on the impact of the additional parking on the neighbourhood, a condition which would relate to the proposed dwelling, along with satisfying that the current changes are congruent with the future plans of the buildings. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Biff.
Thank you, Chairman. Difficult one. I think it's really important that we understand that we did do a site visit there, and we do understand the impact of parking, and we take into account as well when considering the parking, the time of day we go and what's going on in the area. I think as a local councillor, I fully appreciate the problems associated with this particular area. There are only 2 access points, one off the Firefield Road, one off the Moulton Road, and everybody is fully aware how difficult it is to get to this location. I think it's important to remember as well that we're not here tonight to discuss the merits of a 3-bedroom house. That plan's already slipped through and wasn't objected to, so as far as I'm aware. I think what we have to remember here tonight is we're here purely to decide on what's going on with the extension, which is in the roof area, and whether or not we grant that. When we look down the road, we find it very hard to I would find it very hard to refuse it. Not only is the one next door, but other various properties have already got it. But what I do think we need to do is we need a couple of conditions, and I'm happy to propose those. One is to remove permitted development rights from the property. The second one will be no HMO licence be granted on this premises for a minimum of 5 years from the date of completion. Not from now, but from when the house is actually signed off by EFDC as completed. The reason for that is a person could delay the construction for at least 2.5 years if they wanted to, and that would mean then that, you know, we're only going to get, time everything's gone through, another year on the licence. So I'd like to see that 5 years from completion, if that's possible. And then I'd like to ask officers if it's possible that we could have a condition that with the removal of the permitted development rights, at no time can these 2 houses be linked together and knocked into one unit and therefore overcome the problems with the HMO licence. I think in that case then, unfortunately, we probably would have to grant this on the basis of the house has already got planning permission, and also there are existing roof extensions already in place. What I would like to see is the actual owner of the property tidying up the sideway and tidying up the hedges. Whether or not we can condition those, I'm not sure. Thank you.
Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. Can I support Councillor Bedford in his proposals? I did feel when we got there for the site visit, it was a bit as if we got there with one arm tied behind our back, because we then discovered that permission for another house had already been granted by officers. But nevertheless, I think Councillor Bedford's proposals are sensible and are essential, in fact, and I would like to support those conditions.
Thank you, Councillor. Anybody else? Anybody else? Okay, so your motion, Councillor Bedford, is to no more. Go on.
One point, Chairman. Can we just ask Mr. Rahman or Mr. Courtney, whoever's dealing with it, please, could we have some clarification about the two properties being knocked together, whether or not we can condition that they're not?
Yeah, I can clarify those elements. So, starting with that point is that would require a separate application on its own. I don't believe a separate condition would be required. With regards to removing PD rights for HMO, we can tie this into condition 12, which removes permitted development rights for extensions and stuff. And in terms of the additional condition regarding no HMO license, I'll have to take advice from Mr. Courtney on this.
Yeah, that's fine. If you don't mind me coming in, I would just add a couple of things just on the suggestion about the properties not being combined. I will refer back to the location plan. This application, the red line application site for this application is purely the site where this new dwelling is being proposed. It doesn't include number 8. It doesn't include the neighbouring site. So we wouldn't in any way be able to condition that neighbouring property. So that would make it very difficult as well for anything like that. As Mr. Rahman says, we can certainly add a condition restricting this being turned into a HMO. I would actually suggest this is a separate condition rather than a change to the existing suggested condition, removing the general PD rights, because it is a separate section of the GPDO, so it would make more sense to have it as a separate condition. And I don't see how, in all honesty, we could condition no licence being provided, because that is a separate legislation. But with it being, as we've said, with a restriction on the property being turned into a HMO under planning permission, theoretically they could obtain a licence, but they don't have planning permission, so therefore they can't do it. They would need both in this instance to be able to turn it into a HMO, so it should be sufficient just having that one condition.
Okay, thank you.
Chairman, I wonder if we could condition to prevent any openings being made in the adjoining wall of this property. I think Mr. Richardson is nodding at that. Do you want to say something, Mr. Richardson?
Yeah, sorry, just to come in there, I was thinking exactly the same thing. Perhaps we can condition it so no internal alteration take place to create an internal opening. So, sorry, Graham, but I think that's a good suggestion.
Okay, so let's run through what we've got here. One is prevent any openings, that's just been said, from the one side to the other. Does that stop the other side making an opening? We can't do much about that.
Chairman, they can make it halfway through to the red line, but unless they have the capabilities of platform line and 3/4, I don't think they'll get the whole way through.
Okay. The second one is to refuse permitted development. Any further? Third one is I think this was a separate condition, no HMO, basically. Just a second.
I think what we're looking at is a separate condition that removes the permitted development rights for HMO. I would suggest we could maybe do an informative that says the planning committee was looking to preserve it as a single dwelling for at least 5 years after completion, but just make that an informative.
Yes. Okay. Okay, Mo, have you got that? Can you form that into words?
Yes. So I've done as 2 separate conditions.
One would be removing PD rights for HMO and PD rights for flank windows. Those would be two separate conditions, plus the informative.
Can I, apologies, can I just come in and no disrespect to Councillor Flip? I do feel if we add an informative along the lines of what you've just said, it almost opens a door that after 5 years we should be finding it acceptable to then allow this as a HMO. I feel if we didn't specify that, it would be a case of judging on its own merits if and when they apply to either remove the condition or turn it into a HMO, which they may not do. But I do feel if we added informative saying we want it to be a single dwelling for at least 5 years, that would inadvertently suggest that after 5 years we would be happy with it turning into a HMO, and I'm not entirely certain that members would be. But obviously it's up to yourselves.
Chairman, I take Mr Courtney's point. It's a valid one. Perhaps we could just apply a note to the file for this particular property that's held within planning, so that if officers do move on and a different officer is considering an application for HMO in the future, they would be aware of the discussion that's gone on.
Yes, I agree with that. Thank you. So we have a... Councillor McIver.
Thank you, Chairman, and I'm supportive of Councillor Bedford's pragmatic conditions. All I would add is kind of the point that Mr Courtney was making. I don't feel that a 5-year, to me that says, well, in 5 years' time it could be considered. I'd rather it just said something like no HMO ever, or a much longer period of time. So I take advice on how we could best do that. I just think it's a totally inappropriate place to have an HMO, and the parking in not just this close but the entire area is an absolute nightmare. It's so unfair on people with prams, people with disabilities. The damage to the highways infrastructure is immense, a huge cost to the taxpayer. So I would like to see the strongest possible condition to ensure that that never becomes a HMO. It's a totally inappropriate location. The entire road is inappropriate for it, but specifically this position.
Okay, gentlemen up there, can that be done? Can we just say never? Or 10 years or 20 years?
Again, we can't, I would use any timescales. I mean, the key here is that we're removing permitted development rights. We are saying we want to remove that right to turn it into a HMO because we do not think it's suitable. We can make it very clear in the reason for that, why we feel it's unacceptable, and exactly what Councillor McIver's just said. We can add that all in, that it's completely unsuitable. And actually, what it would then mean is, if there is ever an application to remove that condition or to turn it into a HMO, essentially they would have to show us how they've addressed that and why that is no longer an issue. So I think purely making sure we've got a really strong reason for removing those PD rights would be the best way to approach this.
Okay, thank you. And that was obviously with the note that's suggested for any future meetings to consider that. So, unless there's anybody else, we have a proposer and we have a seconder. So, can we vote on those conditions, please?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Thank you. So that's unanimous. Can we please vote on the whether you support the officer's proposal to agree the application with the conditions we've just stated?
(16), Chairman.
Against?
1, Chairman.
Abstaining? No.
None, Chairman.
Thank you. So that has been approved. Thank you very much.
Chairman, could I just say, we've had a couple of occasions now where they've said the Town Council has not made any comments, and I appreciate that the Chairman of the Town Council is here longer, but it's come up in other Town Councils as well. They don't necessarily have their planning meetings to fit in with our meetings, and we've had this a couple of times when they've considered matters too late for it to come to be considered an objection. I don't know how the way we can get round this, but I do think we should look at it because it seems to be coming up more and more.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is by the time these items come to committee, and by the time the officer writes a report, I don't think that is correct. The town council should be able to get their comments in time, because the officers very rarely write a report within 3 or 4 weeks of the planning application. In fact, you'll find that most of these applications have probably been in 3, 4, 5 months. So I don't think that is a reason, but we will look into it. We will ask our officers to double check, but I think the town and parish councils will have plenty of time to make comments. I don't think that's a reason, to be honest.
Okay, on that
Chairman,
one.
if I could just add to that from Theodore Boyce's point of view, which I'm aware of, occasionally they've not had an appropriately timed planning committee. What they've done is they've informed the officers that they are planning to meet to discuss it, and that the response will be coming in whenever it is after that. And I think parish councils do that. Most parish councils have a clerk who is aware of the planning applications and knows the date and time of the planning committees. They can let the officer know that there may be a response, and when that response is likely to come, and that will then allow the officers to move forward, because we do actually have a very clear target about when we need to bring applications forward. We can't just delay them.
No, I think if everybody makes sure their own parish councils and their wards are aware of all this, that'll be fine. But there you go. Some will always get missed. Okay, so I think we're on to the next item, which is item 13, EPF 0597/23/4, Kendall Avenue, Epping, CM16 4PN, pages 73 to 80. And that is...
I think all three of the last three are mine, Chairman.
Okay, thank you.
I will be presenting this one. So thank you, Chairman. So this application is for the removal of condition 8 and variation of condition 2 on EPF/3050/21. The original application was for a replacement dwelling. This application seeks to retain the existing access onto Heartland Road, which was previously proposed for removal. The application is before committee since we've received an objection from the Town Council and 2 neighbours, as well as the Epping Society. The application is recommended for approval. So this shows the 2 existing access points. This top one is on Kendall Avenue, and this bottom one here is onto Heartland Road. This is the previously approved scheme. The submission proposed to remove the access onto Heartland Road. This does not appear to have been requested by the case officer or Essex County Council. However, since the access was going to be removed, a condition was added requiring the access to be closed and curbing reinstated. This is the proposal. So the applicant now wishes to retain the existing access onto Heartland Road, as well as that onto Kendall Avenue. Therefore, they are seeking to remove the condition requiring the reinstatement of the curb, and they are seeking a variation of the approved drawings condition to insert this plan. There's no objection from Essex County Council Highways regarding the retention of the existing access, and therefore, despite concerns from the Town Council and neighbours, there'd be no additional harm to highway safety or distribution as a result of this proposal. Since both access points currently exist, there'd be no harm to neighbouring amenities as a result of this proposal, and therefore the application is recommended for approval. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Okay, we have... okay, 2 speakers. The first one is Town Councillor Nigel Avey.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you.
Good evening, members. I'm sure you're already quite tired after quite a long meeting, but I hope you can deal with this matter. I think the reason for the removal of this access was pretty clear when the first application was put before you. This has always been a traffic hazard, this opening onto Heartland Road. It's very close to a very, very busy junction. For those councillors who live in Epping, you all know the amount of traffic that comes around the back of Epping High Street and turns into Heartland Road from Kendall Avenue. quite considerable volume of traffic. And it's always been a concern. In fact, there have been accidents at that junction. It's always been a concern that you wouldn't want traffic or cars coming out of that access point because of that. And I think that's what the neighbours have, the residents have put into you, and certainly residents I've spoken to all believe that is right. I mean, there's a perfectly adequate access to this property from Kendall Avenue, and I can't see why they have to have two access points to the property under the new development. So frankly, I think it's a matter of common sense. Don't agree to this request, and please keep it as is, and we can get rid of something which is a traffic problem. Thank you.
Thank you, Nigel. Now we have Tom Whiffen, who's the applicant's agent via Teams. Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for taking the time to hear me, members. I'll keep this short and sweet for you. As you're aware, the planning permission was granted last October for my client's replacement dwelling. Part of the proposal included one of the two existing vehicle entrances to be closed off, and the one we wanted to close off was the one onto Hartland Road. Our client now wishes to retain the existing entrance. Whilst the Parish Council have strongly objected to this proposal, the committee should note that this vehicular access already exists. We are not proposing to alter it in any way, shape or form. The Council and the Highways Department did not request for this to be removed. We proposed it as part of our application. However, our clients just want to retain this now. The Highways requested that the path to be infilled and the drop curb removed to reinstate the public highway. The two neighbours have commented about the amenity and the impact on them. However, this is an existing situation and therefore is no change. The same neighbours have also stated that the clear next application would be for flats, which, as I'm sure you're all aware, has been refused many times on this site. And this is definitely not my client's intention. Members should also note that if my clients decide not to go ahead with building this new house, the existing access points will remain. Because they are already there. We're not proposing to add a new one. We're not proposing to alter it. We're just proposing to keep it because it is already there. My clients could also decide to sell the house, move out, and the access points would also remain. So the common sense thing to do is approve it because it was already there. There's not much more to really add to that, and I trust that you can approve our application. Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any members wishing to speak? It doesn't seem so. So if we can go straight to a vote, and the officer's recommendation is to approve. Those in favour?
Chairman.
Those against?
1, Chairman. We should have 2 abstentions. Yep.
Thank you. So that application is approved. On to the next one, which is item 14, EPF 0832 23 323, Civic Offices, Epping Forest District Council, High Street, Epping, CM16 4BX, page 81 to 88. Ian, I think you'll take us through that. Graham? Can't hear you.
Graham, you're on mute.
Graham, we can't hear you.
My apologies. Apologies. That was a rookie mistake, that one. Right, so thank you, Chairman. This application seeks listed building consent for 2 new signs on the civic offices. These are a stainless steel wall-mounted sign adjacent to the bridge and a stainless steel Regis sign below the existing Epping Forest District Council sign on the frontage. The application is before committee since there's an objection from the Town Council who have registered to speak. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. Not that it's probably very necessary, but here are some photos of the front of the office that I'm sure you're all very, very familiar with. So the proposed signage would be located just here, next to the bridge, and here. They would be non-illuminated, and they both already benefit from advertisement consent. This application is simply for the listed building consent. There appears to be no concern regarding the wall-mounted sign next to the bridge. The main issue is regarding the sign on the frontage, this one here. The concerns regarding this sign are that it visually competes with the Epping Forest District Council sign and the function of the civic offices. This is the view of the council's conservation officer. Whilst these opinions are noted, the use of the building has now changed and Regis share the building with the council, so this is no longer functioning purely as civic offices. The Regis sign is, apologies, the Regis signage is significantly smaller than that of the council's sign and is set below and is considered to be appropriately subordinate. Conditions have been recommended to ensure that the harm to the listed building is minimised and that the signage is removed and the wall made good should the signage no longer be necessary. Subject to conditions, the application is recommended for approval. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. We have one speaker on that. That's Councillor Avey.
Thank you, Chairman. I've just been offering a prayer there to the patron saint of lost causes before I say anything. But as I understand it, the objection really relates to a perception of whether it is a civic offices or whether it's actually a building owned by Regis. And that seems to have caused some concern amongst some town councillors and residents. Again, I leave this to the committee to decide, but you have the objection from the town council. Please consider it.
Thank you. So, do we have any, would like to say anything? Councillor Whitburn.
Thank you, Chairman. I don't know if it's really worth coming back with a comment, but what I would say is that it's very much a reality that Regis is based here, but also council services are based here, and actually it's not the place for a political debate, and the town council's response does seem to be somewhat political, but I would say that actually there's far more uses for the civic offices in terms of being a community hub than pre-pandemic. And actually, I know that many residents are aware of that from having the NHS mental health services based here to officers on the ground to support residents as this building's primary function is for. But actually, the funds which are being brought in through Regis are helping keep council tax down and provide excellent services, as Councillor Avey might remember as from his time in the Cabinet here. Thank you, Chairman.
Councillor Phillip.
Thank you, Chairman. And it's pleasing to hear Councillor Avey refer to St Jude of Thaddeus, who's the patron saint of lost causes. I'm sure he knew. But I think the key part here is, if you look on the middle of page 6, it suggests this sign would compete with the Epping Forest District Council sign. I think when we saw on the representation, the Regis sign is significantly smaller and subservient to the Epping Forest District Council. I think it was perfectly acceptable to flag a tenant who is a very valuable tenant of this building, bringing in significant revenue. And I think it's perfectly reasonable that they would want to have an indication that they are here. And it's certainly, I think, a lot better than the flapping signs that we had outside before. And the idea that it's in this construction which actually matches the Epping Forest sign, I think, is a very positive thing, and I will certainly support this.
Thank you. Councillor Bedford, sorry.
Yeah, my only concern is, and I think it is really covered in condition number 3, is about how it's fixed to the building. I know when working in the city, most of the premises up there, when they're listed buildings, they tend to go for fixes in the mortar because the mortar's easily repairable. Whereas if we're going into the soft sandstone, it does leave a mark. That's my only comment, really. I know it's already probably covered in the conditions, but happy to support this.
Thank you. Is that covered in the conditions?
Yes, it is. I believe Councillor Bedford just refer to condition 3. I'm just pulling up the conditions now. Apologies. Yeah, so condition 3, details of fixtures, including information on how damage to the listed building will be minimised, shall be submitted for approval. Blah, blah, blah. So, yeah, absolutely. We would expect those details, as Councillor Bedford suggested. Certainly fixing to the mortar would be preferable. So we would expect that as part of those details.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor McCready.
Thank you, Chairman. I'm just a little bit confused about something here. This is application 0832, but looking on page 83, there's reference made to 0842, advertisement consent to brush stainless steel, blah, blah, blah. Was that a separate application for something different? Thank you.
No, that was the associated advertisement consent. So similar to what we discussed earlier with the Greg's pod down at the service station, advertisement consent is a separate permission that is required. So this particular proposal required advertisement consent for the advert and then listed building consent for the fact that it was affixed to a listed building. The advertisement consent has been granted permission because you are it's very limited in terms of what you assess for an advertisement consent. This is purely the listed building consent now, but they are two separate consents, but they are for the same works.
Thank you. Anybody else? Oh, Councillor Ferry.
Thank you, Chairman. Whilst I appreciate that we just bring in a revenue stream, I still think that this is the civic offices, this is a council building, and we shouldn't allow a Regis sign to go up. They are very well signposted within the building and outside, so I will strongly object to that. Thank you.
Thank you. If there's nobody else, then we go to the vote, which is to agree with the officer's recommendation to grant permission.
Chairman.
Against?
4, Chairman.
Abstaining?
Should be none. We're down to 16 now.
Right, so that is granted. Thank you. Okay, the last one, 15, item 15, EPF 1192/23 Essex House, 118 High Street, Ongar, CM5, 9EB, pages 89 to 84. Graham.
Thank you, Chairman. I think everyone will be glad to hear this is the last application for the night. Let me just this one up. So this application is for the installation of 6 conservation-style roof lights and 2 conservation-style flat roof lights on Essex House, which is an office building situated on the corner of High Street and Castle Street in Ongar. The application is before members as there are 8 neighbour objections. The application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. The office building is situated within a conservation area, but it is not itself listed or locally listed. The site is surrounded by predominantly residential properties to the east and south, although there are other commercial properties nearby. So this is the existing building, which is a rather handsome and prominent structure. This is the view from the other side of the junction. This is the view from Castle Street. So these are the existing floor plans and elevations. This shows the proposal. So as can be seen, there would be 5 roof lights here in the southern roof slope, 1 here in the eastern roof slope, and the 2 flat roof lights would be situated atop this addition here. This is a photograph of the building from the garden of 108 High Street, which shows where the majority of the roof lights would be, which is just here. The main concerns from neighbours are regarding the appearance and loss of privacy. This scheme is a revision on a previously withdrawn proposal, and the Conservation Officer is now satisfied with the development and supports the application. With respect of overlooking, these are high-level windows that would not provide that would provide additional light to the existing building. They would not provide opportunities to overlook the neighbours. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to conditions. That's the end of my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Graham. Okay, we have one speaker here. This is Mr. Roger McNulty, who's objector. Thank you. 3 minutes, please.
Thank you. And first of all, apologies for the interruption earlier. It was a medical alert. I did switch my phone off. My name is Roger McNulty. My wife and my family have been fortunate to live at 108 High Street in one of the listed buildings neighbouring Essex House, which itself is a heritage asset. We've been there almost 33 years and have lived in Ongar for over 50 years. I'd firstly like to thank you for the opportunity of speaking and apologise for bombarding all of you with my email and images. Also, thanks to Councillor Vaz for coming to visit the site. To be clear, I'm not averse to the developer inserting roof-light windows in this attic. But 6 on this side of the roof, I believe, is just excessive. There are 2 issues. The first one is overlooking and creating loss of privacy, and the other is overbearing in that particular setting and out of scale. I recognise also that the planning and conservation officers don't always have time or resource to visit all developments from back gardens, and I understand that. I hope my images were useful. Hence image. The first image is taken from inside our living room in our listed barn conversion. You can see that 5 of the windows would directly overlook us, and the neighbours closer have similar issues and objections. I appreciate, as mentioned, that the windows are angled skyward. From inside the building, they will be at average eye height. The applicant, Renewal Homes Limited, states the estimate number of occupants after the development will be 15. There is therefore an overlooking and privacy issue here. I read recently a chartered town planner stating there's a higher expectation of privacy to rear windows and private rear gardens, which usually enjoy a greater degree of seclusion. On overbearing, outer scale and appearance, the second image shows the Essex House and the adjoining listed building. You can't see that here, but you have seen it hopefully on my mail. The 6 windows on the 6 new windows on the roof elevation of Essex House are clearly out of proportion to listed buildings in the surrounding area. Have been allowed 1. Funnily, Ongar Town Council unanimously objected to this application.
Mr. could you start to wind up, please? Thank you.
Yeah. Ongar Town Council unanimously objected to this application along with the 8 other residents. I'm asking, therefore, that you have due regard to the wishes of the neighbours and the Town Council here and refuse this application in relation to 6 roof-light windows. If you could reduce them to 2 on the south-facing flank, that would be fine. Thank you all for listening, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you. Okay, members. Councillor Kesker.
As you might have expected, Chairman. I have a question first, if I could. What does the internal plan of the building show for this roof space? Might I ask Mr. Courtney with that?
Yes, you can. it doesn't show that there is any additional floor space being used in that roof area. I did wonder that myself and double check the plans earlier on, and I've got them in front of me here. And yeah, there is no proposal as part of this to add any additional floor in or to make use of that additional roof area. There's no additional stairway. There's no additional floor plan. So yeah, we're treating this as additional light only to that area. And just sorry, apologies. Just before we go back to members' questions, I did actually just want to. I missed it off my presentation, and actually it's quite apt given some of the comments earlier. We did actually receive, and the objector did just mention this. We did receive a late objection in this case from the town council, so they did object to this application. The reasoning for that is they said objection. It was felt that 6 + 2 roof lights was excessive on one roof elevation, which would lead to overlooking onto surrounding listed properties. Make sure members are aware of that during the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. If I could go on, then I've got quite a few comments to make here. There was an earlier application for 12 windows in the roof, and discussion with planning officers. There was an objection from the conservation area officer, and it was withdrawn. It's now come back with 6 ordinary windows and 2 others. I cannot see any difference, or why there should be any difference in objection from the conservation area officer, whether there's 6 or whether there's 12. If you have got objections, those objections stand. It doesn't matter how many windows are there. I will then go on to the point that they've said there could be 15 residents looking out of these windows. It's an attic. There's nobody in the roof. That would indicate that this is the first stage of something rather different, which we are not considering tonight, and I make that clear. There is a considerable overlooking problem here at the back, and it's no good saying that they can't overlook people's gardens and houses, because apparently 15 people are going to be up there looking out of them. There's also the question, and I don't know how this affects it, this is in a conservation area. The owners have removed all of the leaded lights, which they should not have done, and I have a question to say, are we as a council taking any action against them to have these restored? How can we consider this application when the building itself is being altered in all sorts of other ways, which is contrary to regulations and, I would have thought, to our wishes? Also, I was informed that this was locally but not nationally listed. Now I'm told that it isn't locally listed at all, so I'm a bit concerned about that. This was the old district council office originally and is a landmark site in Ongar. It's the beginning of the Narrows, the bit where they can't get a lorry and a car through together, and is a particular landmark. Why would you want to put 8 windows in a loft that isn't being used? I just cannot see the point of this, and although we have to take the application on what is in front of us, the whole thing seems completely pointless to a building that has been altered substantially without any authority, and probably is the first stage of other alterations. Now, I appreciate, again, I've sat in your chair too many times and said we cannot take other things into consideration, but I think the overlooking, the excessive number of roof lights for an attic, which nobody is in, would be, to me, sufficient reason to turn this down, and I intend to vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Ferber.
Thank you, Chairman, and Councillor Keska has hit a couple of things that concern me as well. I think there is certainly a worry about what might happen if these were put in place. So I would like to propose that if we're minded to grant, that we add a condition to remove Class O of the General Permitted Development Rights, which is the GPDO that allows you to convert from offices to residential. So I think we'd be quite within our rights to add that as a condition to this. And I was actually going to go further and actually, as a committee, suggest that we ask the planning department to commence enforcement action against the unlawful modifications to this building.
Okay.
Chairman, can I say, if Councillor Phillip is going to put that forward as an additional condition, I would second that.
So that condition is removal of permitted development. What about the number of fan lights there? I mean, you've got 12 to 6, to 2, to 3. It's aesthetics, isn't it?
My objection is clear. I've already made my point. I shan't be voting for it, whatever happens. But
even with one. Okay. Right. The proposal there was from Councillor Physic is to remove permitted development. Do we have a seconder for that? Councillor Bedford. Can we have a vote on that, please?
Unanimous, Chairman.
Okay, so nobody else has got anything else to say. I think we have to go to a vote now, don't we? On whether we support the officer's recommendation to approve or not. So those in favour of the officer's recommendation to approve, please raise your hand. Those against?
Sorry.
Wait a minute.
Shall we start again?
Try again.
Those in favour of approving the application as per the officer's recommendation.
With the conditions.
With the extra.
With the
Seven, Chairman.
And those against?
Eight, Chairman. We must have an abstention.
No, one lady walked out.
So it's just gone, yeah.
Oh, right, okay. Right. I didn't see that. Apologies. So
the application is refused. Thank you.
No, we need a recommendation for refusal.
Recommendation for refusal from Councillor Kesker.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, on the basis of overlooking and the, I don't know if you can call it the damage to this important landmark location in Ongar. If anyone else has got any other reasons they'd like to add to that, I'd be very happy to consider them.
Okay, are we happy with that? Is that completed? Okay. Let's move on. Exclusion of public and press. No, we don't have to. So I'll close the meeting now at.
Well, we haven't voted on that.
Chairman, we haven't done the motion to refuse yet,
No.
and we need a seconder.
We've got a motion to refuse and a seconder, please.
A second.
And who's the pushing the motion? Thank you. Okay, so we have two proposals and a seconder. We go to the vote to refuse.
Chairman.
Thank you. So once again,
Those against.
those against.
10, Chairman. Against refusal. This is against the motion to refuse. So we have 5, Chairman.
Okay.
So there shouldn't be any abstentions now.
No abstentions. Okay, thank you. So the meeting. Oh, here we go. 1, 2, 3.
Sorry.
What, are you standing up to?
I thought they came home.
I don't know what happened there. Gary, get hold of this. Get hold of this.
Excuse me,
What we're
gentlemen.
doing there.
Are we finished? Are you standing up to refer this to DMCC or just going home?
There weren't enough standing up anyway.
Should we close the meeting, Chairman?
About to. Meeting's closed at whatever the time is, 20 to 10.